Welcome to Thought Leader Life, episode number 56. It is great to be here. I'm particularly excited because for the entire month, I have a new co-host, Kelley Steven-Waiss, who's the SVP of HR at Extreme Networks. And what that is encouraging us to do is bring on a collection of guests and people with us who are absolutely phenomenal in terms of the employee engagement, employee advocacy, the future of work, future of HR. So Kelley, it's great to have you here. And we have as a guest Mike Grove, the CEO of CollabWorks. And I'm looking forward to the interaction. Kelley, thanks again for being the co-host for the month.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mitchell. And I'm very excited to have Mike Grove with me today as well. Mike and I have a common thread, and that is a focus and a strong passion for the future of work. So I wanted to ask you, Mike, as a first kind of question to get us talking, is how do you believe that technology is going to really evolve employee engagement and the connection between those two?
Thanks, Kelley, and pleasure to be here today. Well, as we've talked before, employee engagement is a big topic. There's a lot of data about that issue, and I view engagement actually as an outcome. In other words, we don't go out and fix engagement. We basically develop culture, behavior, processes, and the outcome is really engagement. In my view, employees want to be engaged. The trick is to keep them engaged and keep them interested. And so we believe it starts with a very fundamental process, which is what is the work? And if the work is interesting, if the workers have an opportunity to grow, if they feel like they have some autonomy over their work and how to serve the customers that they do the work for, you're going to find that those employees are a lot more engaged than those who are just given tasks and are asked to respond and report the results of their tasks. So I think there's a lot to be gained with engagement. And so technology-wise, it's really important that people are clear about the work, what their priorities are, and how to basically manifest that work with their customers.
And it's very different, Mike, than, you and I both have talked about this too, is, job descriptions are very constraining, right? You get hired into a job. Job descriptions today can't even define everything that you do today. So in what you do, you really talk about, defining the work and particularly the capabilities of those people that are actually doing the work. Explain how that manifests itself in what you're doing.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, yeah, we start with what we call reality. What is it people actually do? And rather than have some third party come in and try to figure that out, or have the manager go through a bunch of questionnaires and so forth, we actually ask the workers themselves, what is it they do? And where do they spend their time? Who are their customers? We ask them, I think, a very important question, which is what talent is really required for the work they're doing. And then once you actually know what the work is and they participate in that process, and then you know what talent is required, and this is a consensus process that takes place, you then look at the alignment of the actual talent that's doing that work and how it matches up with the actual talent required. So, for example, the top talent that we see with our particular clients are actually only doing 30% top talent work. And so if you think about that, how engaging is that if 70% of the work you're doing is really not where you need to be? So this awareness really helps both the worker and the company actually figure out how to better optimize their actual talent.
Yeah, and it's very tied in, I think, to what we're doing at Extreme Networks, which is, our goal. We fundamentally believe that people will do their best work and be highly engaged when it's work they want to be doing. And a lot of times, traditional performance management systems aren't allowing managers to really carry that dialogue. A lot of it is literally looking at goals, rating against a system, identifying somebody with a label, and then off they go. And maybe it's a once-a-year conversation. I think what we're trying to drive through Extreme Exchange, much like what the work you're doing and with your technology is, how do we have a conversation about the intersection of what you do well, where your aspirations are, and what's going to help the company get to the next level?
Yeah, I think that's terrific, by the way, and congratulations to you guys with that kind of thinking. I think that's right on target. So yeah, from our standpoint, we think that the worker basically has a lot of ideas on how to improve what they're doing. And so the experience that we get is not just what are you doing, but what can you do better? And how can you intersect your own ideas of what can be improved with what the company needs? So that stimulation starts to create new leadership where people who work, particular managers, just ordinary folks doing a real good job, have an opportunity to come forward with ideas that actually improve their customer's experience, as well as create an economic advantage for the company. And this is more this entrepreneurial type of opportunities for everyone to really participate in the process of really helping the business move forward. And it's amazingly stimulating when you see that happen.
How do you think the future of work is going to change the way we manage people?
I think it's going to be more open. I think it's more transparent in terms of, is management really a position? Is it a box on an organization chart? Or is it really a service? Is management really something that can be part-time, full-time? We often promote really good technical people into management positions, and they often don't turn out to be great managers. They're great technically. So how can you compromise? Well, you don't necessarily have to have that technical person manage people on a day-to-day basis. You can actually use teams. You can have other leaders participate in that type of activity. So I think we need to open up the idea of management and not look at it so much in a structural way, but look at it more as a process.
So, Mike, by the way, that was sorry, Kelley. Mike, that was sort of a softball for you, because for those that are watching, and certainly for those that are listening, underneath Mike's tagline is inventor of WAAS, inventor of WAS. So Mike, why don't you talk about what that is?
Well, we're really excited about WAS. So most people out there have probably heard of SaaS, which is software as a service. And as we move into the shared economy and we move into this more virtual world of work, we see worker or work as a service as the next generation of service coming forward. So WAS is really a nickname for work as a service. And it's a process. It's pretty easy to implement, and what comes out of it is a significant improvement in productivity, worker engagement. It's an amazing amount of leadership that comes out from not the managers top down, but from actually workers with real problems bottom up.
One thing that's really interesting about that, Mike, and you and I've talked about this, is what is the role of the HR leader? Because typically some of the things that you're doing would fall into operations of a company and identifying, cost savings through the way work is getting managed. Do you see this really changing the role of HR leadership and engaging with how the operations and process orientation of work getting done, and maybe even the capabilities of a CHRO needing to be different?
Yes, I think that I think there's an opportunity for HR to become more strategic, and it really boils down to two aspects of, I think, their role that could expand. And I think so. One of it is around the use of talent. It's not just what is the talent, how do we get it, and how do we retain it, but what is the use of it? How do we make it effective? And often HR executives tend to be shy around operating issues and, oh, that's the work, we really don't touch that space. But with the right tools, the right communication, the right clarity, which is part of what our WAS process provides, you can really intersect as an HR executive with the line management. You can view and see how the talent's being used, and you can start to develop processes and programs that basically help them advance the use of that talent, which then bottom line gets to the second aspect, which I think really the HR executive can now make an impact on, which is really P&L. If you think about P&L, the largest single expense for most companies is the people cost. And it's not a matter of just how much you pay people, it's a matter of what you get from what you pay people. And so if you don't understand the work, you don't understand how much of that work has high priority, you don't understand how to remove the low value work and replace the higher value work, how can you possibly get the most out of your people? So we see the HR executives starting to learn what we call return on labor employed, which is similar to return on capital employed to the CFO. And we think the HR executive needs to become quite aware of return on labor employed. So I think it's a huge opportunity for HR executives.
So given that, Mike, what do you think the skill sets will be required for the future of HR? If we really believe that this will come to fruition or there's an opportunity there, what skill sets do you think will HR leaders need to have?
I think that they need to be able to interact from a business standpoint with their other C-level peers, not so much having to know the technical ins and outs and not even the actual business transactions per se, but if you think about it, what really causes productivity within a company? And so I think the HR executive needs to be able to reach out and communicate with their peers along those lines. And so it's not a matter of coming up with, let's say, a separate training program to train your managers and so forth. It's a matter of being engaged with the managers and their workers and observing their processes and really helping them improve in real time. So it's much more of a proactive real time as opposed to, how are we kind of observing and maybe influencing? It's more an active participation.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think the other piece of it that you mentioned that I know that the WAS technology will actually enable is a lot of data and analytics. So will that be another skill set that's required as well? Maybe even predictive analytics.
Yeah, well, very good point. And I think, unfortunately, the analytics has gotten, I think, a lot of play lately. But if you're analyzing bad data, for example, job descriptions, and you're not really at the work, you really don't understand the reality of the situation, you're just analyzing data, you can often end up with the wrong answer. So there's been a lot of studies where people made decisions and then regretted those decisions because they really didn't have valuable data. The beauty thing about WAS is it starts with what we call the reality of what the real work is, and it's not just a management idea, but it's the worker's idea as well. And it's all connected to customers internally as well as externally. So what we've developed is metrics now that you can actually determine, for example, what is the service value of a group, an individual, or a group of groups. And it doesn't have to be structurally related. In other words, it could be a SWAT team of a whole variety of different functions working together to solve a problem. It also needs to extend beyond the actual organization to your suppliers, perhaps your customers, where you're looking at them as participants in problem solving. And as we've talked before, even into what we call the on-demand community, where you're actually using resources that are not full-time employees, but are helping your company solve problems. All of this can be measured and tracked with certain metrics. But if you don't know what the work is, and you don't know how much time and energy is being spent on that work, and you don't understand the attributes of the work, you can't possibly make good decisions.
Yeah, and typically the having the aptitude for data and analytics is not one for HR executives today, but certainly the ability to build relationships and collaborate, I think, is a kind of a critical skill, and also the ability to develop culture. So in this model of work being done in this way, how do you think that's going to impact company culture?
That's a really good one. I always get amused at, some of these fairly large consulting firms that sell huge projects to transform, the upper management and the rest of the company in the culture process, right? And I don't know if there's been a study that showed the outcome 5 years later, but my gut feel is that, you know, it's a mixed outcome at least. And so I think culture is something that you observe. And so if you have a culture which is sincere and it's really designed to help the worker advance as well as the company, and you're consistent with that, so people learn to trust it, that it's not just a matter of what we can get from you as an employee, but what can we help you with so you can give us something back. That kind of exchange creates a culture. It creates a win-win culture, and I think those are the ones that are going to come out on top in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because I think some of the work that you're doing, like, and with your technology, is really going to be highly suited to the new workforce that's coming in. So a lot of the millennials, speaking of the new culture, are very tied to doing work that motivates and inspires them, and also not being tied into one job per se, but constantly putting new things in their toolkit. So I do believe that some of the work that you're doing is going to enable that new company culture, the new way to engage this very mission-driven generation coming up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, by the way, even for the other generations, I'll stick up for them as well. I think we all like variety. And I think that's one of the mega trends that's really happening is that people want more choice. And so one of the things that we ask right up front is, and we're very clear with the management, by the way, that if you're not sincere and you're not interested in really helping your workers advance, don't do this. Don't do last. We don't really, frankly, want a reputation where we don't succeed with the worker. And I think it's not that hard. You know, really, when you get down to it, if you find out, you know, let the worker describe what it is they're doing. You ask them what they would like to do differently, how they would like to improve themselves. But it's not just, you know, hey, I want to go get an MBA. No, it's around the work they actually do. And so I think it's very easy to manifest the win-win process. It's just a matter of thinking of it.
And by the way, for those that are watching, you're hearing my head, you're seeing my head bob up and down because I'm in such complete agreement. It's so funny. The last time I worked for a company was 1997, and in '97, you know, it's still, and I still think this is true today. Having talked to companies, we're in this industrial age society where you're supposed to specialize in one and only one thing. Bosses went, you know, way back when I had bosses, always tell me, hey, Mitchell, you're in too many projects. You got to focus. We want to do this one thing and one thing only. I like the opportunity to be able to have the millennial culture, who is by definition an ADD culture, be able to focus on many things, but in particular take advantage of the skill sets that they're good at. And it's so easy, or how about we say, it's easier to imagine that happening today. And Kelley, and maybe you could address this, the biggest problem is that the way corporate culture and the way corporate infrastructure is set up, it gets away from how business should be running today.
Yeah, I don't think we're definitely, I mean, I'm doing a lot of work on the side to create a tipping point, you know, create demand for something that I definitely see coming. I can't say all my peers see this coming, but I do have kind of a club out there of those of us that do, which is a very different way of working, a very different way of building the inside of an organization, and even defining what an organization is. You know, we bring people together to get something done. But I think what's changing is we bring people together to get something done, and we're bringing people together that like what we do, that feel connected to what we do, and we create an environment where each person can reinvent themselves. And what I see coming is this free agent nation, you know, and it's not just the millennials, by the way. There's many of us in Generation X that are firing ourselves from corporate America and saying, I want to be my own company, very entrepreneurial. And like, as Mike said, we like diversity of work too. It's just that we've been living in an infrastructure that isn't built for that. So who's to say that those of us in Generation X might also adopt the same methodology, which is being totally open to a diversity of work. And the last point I'll mention is that there is this notion that people will be living a lot longer. We're going to have what we call a lot of centurions, as they call them, people that will work as they get up into their later years. And so we're not prepared for these young people coming in, and we're certainly not prepared for these older people, and as their energy levels might change or their requirements around work change. So we as HR need to reinvent ourselves. We are forced to reinvent ourselves to make that work.
Couldn't agree more. And I'm excited by the fact you've got your core group. As you know, we've talked to quite a few of your peers, and it's really exciting to see that group start to grow. And I think we're not that far from a tipping point. When you look at the shared economy, and you look at so-called Uberism and Airbnb, and now it's really starting to come into the workplace. And I listened to one of the major on-demand suppliers, really on-demand platform suppliers here not too long ago, and large companies, Fortune 50 companies, are beginning to, little by little, experiment with on-demand capabilities, for example. And I'd like to talk a little bit about, I think, one of the most fundamental forces that's really going to make this all happen, and that's economics. When you think about, and I'm going to look at it from both the individual point of view and the company point of view. For an individual, I like to call it either Mary or Joe Inc. It's really the enterprise of one. Whether you're working full-time for a company, whether you're working for several companies, how do you basically get what you want in terms of your own financial needs? How do you build your own security? At the same time, enjoy your process. And so you need a network of friends. You need a network of relationships. You need to be able to introduce yourself to folks. And those are all entrepreneurial, enterprise in one type of behaviors. But if you look at the larger companies in particular, how much waste is involved right now in labor? How much waste is involved in doing work that really is repetitive or unimportant? And when I talk to executives, I'm hearing numbers of 40, 50, 60% of the actual work that people do is considered wasted. And so when you think about that inefficiency, and you start thinking about being able to build transparency, where it's really clear what is the work, who's doing the work, what's the result at the customer level, how are we adapting to changing customer needs internally as well as externally, what's going to happen is that people are going to start to see huge changes in productivity, which is what's happening in our WASM world. We're seeing an average change of 15%. Well, when you start seeing those kinds of changes, and by the way, it's not rocket science. It's actually just listening to people who can see the problem and allowing them to fix it. And so when you start doing that, those players will build the economic advantage over those that are laggards. And so what I think we're going to see here in the next 5 years is a huge early adopter game, just like what happened when we went to the web. The first people that got onto the web, understood it, and used it, got an advantage. And what's going to happen around the most important economic issue we've got as businesses, people, is that paradigm is going to come into place. And so those HR executives who get it now and who compare now and can be involved in that are going to ride the biggest wave of change, and I believe in corporate history in the last 100 years.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I hope to be one of them.
You are. Well, you are one of them.
Yeah, I've been looking at Extreme Networks as my master lab. In fact, my Twitter handle is Extreme Kelley because I'm doing everything, I think, at least from all appearances, as extreme as possible, on the bleeding edge as possible. My hope is that I'm no longer bleeding edge because we have more people doing it, but it wouldn't hurt to be first in line to ride the wave, that's for sure, and to demonstrate productivity. And Mike, as you know, and Mitchell, I think you know as well, my aspirations are not to be an HR executive for the rest of my career. You know, I hope one day to run a company. Maybe that's the enterprise of one. Who knows? But I definitely aspire to do bigger and better things too. So.
Which I support. I think that's terrific, by the way. And I want to just reinforce one more point on this economics because a lot of companies, even extreme, are looking for ways to get greater margin and to improve what they're doing in the marketplace. And so it's an urgent problem. It's not, this is not something in the future. That's why I like to say it's really now. And so I think there's some real low-hanging fruit. There's some opportunities for the average Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 company today to really take a step back and take a look at what they're doing and start to get back down to the fundamentals of how do we empower people to do the right work, the most valuable work, in a way that they're enabled and want to do. And we have the information now, the technology and the processes to help make that happen. And nothing would make me feel better than if we can help you do that there at Extreme.
Yeah, that's right. It's like a Back to the Future episode. It's now, right?
Yeah, I know.
I like it. So I do want to take a minute to thank the sponsor, Think Aha. The benefits of Think Aha is being able to have particular shows just like this. So within your organization, if you want to be able to interview thought leaders both inside and outside the organization to be able to communicate a more effective point, and I think this is one of the most effective and broad brush things that need to happen today. So I love this episode. And then the content is shared both on YouTube SlideShare in video form, but also in audio form on iTunes and a podcast channel, a blog post. And what's very cool is we'll create a social media enabled ebook in the AHA Amplifier. And so that's another thing. If you're interested in being able to amplify messages in the marketplace, there's an AHA Amplifier, which is 140 Twitter-sized quotes that you can share on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Google+. And this episode will be broken into 40 or so quotes that will be part of an AHA Amplifier book we will absolutely share. So thank you once again, Think for making sure this happens. Mike, is there a question that Kelley should have asked you, or is there something you want to wrap up with that we just haven't talked about yet?
I thought it was actually quite a good exchange, and I really enjoyed it. I think that I guess one of the things that we're actually working on in CollabWorks, we have what we call a thought leadership team, and Kelley is part of that. It's a very diverse group of, I think, just the world's experts on, on-demand platforms and, just the different facets of the future of work. And so one of the things that we're actually tackling right now is the intersection of the so-called shared economy. The idea of how do you lower transaction costs and take advantage of people either in small windows as experts or like they do with these on-demand platforms, as part-time workers or full-time workers that are working virtually. And so how does that intersect with the corporations out there who are really interested in trying to maximize their return on labor employed? And I think there's a huge opportunity coming, and we look forward to trying to see if we can help understand that process a little bit better. So it's been a pleasure actually talking with both of you today, and I enjoyed this interview very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Mike, and thank you, Mitchell.
Oh, you're welcome. Hey, Kelley, is there anything else that you want to add? Is there a question we should add, or what is, as a reflection point on this last half hour we talked, or is there something you want to add, wrap up with for this episode?
Yeah, I think I always want to leave on something provocative, and I think Mike kind of threw that out there, which is this notion of the human cloud, and the fact that work will be done. You might have people that work for you and people that work for you, but via this on-demand platform, and how might technology enable that human cloud? I think there are people doing it. I definitely am thinking about that myself, and we'll see. I don't know where it's going to go, quite yet, but I think it will be fascinating to watch this human cloud develop.
I did
Let
I
me
did have a
ask.
quick question for both of you guys. Could you name just a couple other companies that are being very progressive in terms of the way they look at people? But we know the Amazon and Zappos is a big one. But are there other companies that you look at who are playing along with you guys and trying to help change the workforce?
I mean, I think there's one in particular that I look at for what they're doing around big data and predictive analytics, and that is Intuit. In fact, their HR department is actually hiring data scientists, which is really, really fascinating, and people rotating from IT into human resources. It tells me that something's going on there where there's a shift that HR is making. HR is recognizing a need for a very different skill set in HR. So I find that particularly fascinating. So I see them as a company that's really, on the bleeding edge of what's coming.
Nice. Mike,
Yeah,
anyone you want to mention?
did you want me to add to that?
Yeah, please.
Well, I think, for example, on these on-demand platforms, I will name a few names because they're public, and made public. But for example, Hewlett Packard is HP is working in developing an internal capability to develop on-demand capability. Procter & Gamble has also started to work in that process. American Express. So it's starting. It's more gradual at the bigger company level. We're working with a Fortune 100 company ourselves in a very exciting mode. Where, as I mentioned, we're working with virtual teams and huge productivity gains, amazing amount of engagement with employees and so forth. I might want to say one other thing here with CollabWorks. We actually believe in sipping our own champagne. And so we are really creating a virtual corporation. We are using on-demand capability. We're using part-time, senior people to solve problems. So we're we've scaled the gamut, and we expect to grow hopefully a fairly large corporation in a very new and modern way.
Nice. Well, thank you. I want to make an observation. So when I started my career, and you can see I've got for those that are looking, I got a couple gray hairs. So when I started my career, it was a while ago, and my first job was in Boston, where I was working for a bank, and I knew at that point in time that if I actually told my boss that I didn't want to be, I was doing systems analysis and building systems for investments inside a bank. If I told my boss that I didn't want to do this the rest of my life, that I would be packed up and shuffled out of the office that day. So for those that are employees of Extreme Networks, I want you to recognize that the SVP of HR said that she doesn't want to be the SVP of HR for her entire life, right? And what that says is you've got to find the job you like, the employment stage you like, what you think is going to be adding value to you inside the company, to yourself, and to your customers. And what it'll do is it'll make you more engaged, more excited. And I appreciate you leading by example, Kelley, because that's what the C-suite needs to do to be successful today, is lead by example, and you're absolutely doing that. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and who knows, maybe I would stay in this, quote, job if the job just changed, right? So I think a lot of it is about recognizing what capabilities I bring to bear, and certainly those of employees. If we go in that route, then who knows, right? But,
well, I see the VP HR could be the future CEO.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's hope so.
Hey, well, thank you both. For Mike, thanks for joining us. Kelley, really, once again, thanks for bringing out this level of conversation, because it's absolutely the right thought leader concept and content that we need to be talking about. Looking forward to our next episode. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yes, thank you, Michael.
All right.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.